Hey everyone, Rho here. Today we're discussing the Imperium's next heresy. All the ways the Imperium could implode. General spoiler warning to begin, as the events we're discussing today are from across the Warhammer 40k universe, so you have been warned. But with that said, let's just jump straight in. Now, the Horus Heresy is undoubtedly the Imperium's most defining event. It was the pivotal moment. The hopeful golden age of humanity died, at the very cusp of its fruition. With the Emperor's interment upon the Golden Throne, the Imperium began its gradual slide into the grim dark. And well, it's a slide it has never recovered from. When Guilliman returned to the current Imperium, he was appalled at virtually everything he found, unbelieving that this could be the Imperium he and his brothers fought for, that they bled against their brothers to defend. However, for all this decline, the fact remains the Imperium had survived. It still stood, defiant against the dark. And for all the trials and battles it's faced, it remains the Horus Heresy that came closest to ending it. So, could another such event arise? Could an Imperial civil war once more push the Imperium to the brink? Well, considering the situation of the galaxy, it may not be as unlikely as once thought. So how could the next heresy transpire? What heresy could we see? Well, as always in the lore, there's no small amount of conflict and political intrigue for inspiration. So let's begin. First up, we have the Reboot Heresy. I know Guilliman Heresy sounds better, but it's not called the Lupercal Heresy. It's the Horus Heresy. So Reboot it is. For all the returned Guilliman's loyalty to the Imperium, he's made it clear it's humanity he's fighting for, not his father. Guilliman has become quite clearly pretty bitter at the reception he received within the throne room. When in discussion with Freighter Matthew in the Dark Imperium novel by Guy Haley, we glimpse Guilliman's inner thoughts on the Emperor. To me, he was a father, a distant, uncaring, heartless, manipulative father. That's a far cry from the Guilliman of the Heresy. If I hadn't already said that that was Guilliman's thoughts, you could easily be mistaken for thinking that that was one of the traitor Primarchs. And that is a worrying train of thought. Honestly, even the claim of serving humanity and not the Emperor is already a heresy in itself. But it's clear that bitterness is embedded. And it's undeniable that bitterness was a seed in all the traitor Primarchs' falls, their ultimate betrayal of their father. Now, would Guilliman seek to overthrow his father due to his spurned feelings of neglect, at the Emperor not being able to give him a big father-son hug? No. But that's not the only issue Guilliman appears to have with the Emperor of mankind. The other is his divinity. Guilliman has long fought the notion of the God Emperor. He walked and talked beside the man. He heard from his father's own mouth that he was not a god. The very basis of the Imperium was founded on the imperial truth. Science and reason over faith. That there are no gods. And yet the entire Imperium worships the God Emperor fervently. And what's more, it appears the Emperor could well have ascended to godhood, the outbreaks of his so-called saints increasing in ever-growing numbers, the Immaterium being stilled before Guilliman's passing fleets, and even the possession of Guilliman himself, curing his wounds and bringing him back from the brink of death. The Emperor truly appears to have become a god, despite Guilliman's objections. And that causes Guilliman yet more problems, because there's now a force acting outside his control. A force he doesn't understand, or more importantly, trust. In fact, when we last saw Guilliman in the novel Godblight, he used the word fear to describe his thoughts on the Emperor being active. So we have a Guilliman filled with no small amount of bitterness, and now the added element of fear. Bitterness and fear are not a cocktail that leads to positive actions. And we have even further condemnation. In a final discussion with Belisarius calls Call Inferior, the wink wink definitely not AI machine, it ends with the machine declaring gods are blights on existence, to which Guilliman does not disagree. With all this in mind, as unlikely as it is, the groundwork is there for Guilliman to turn against the Emperor. Not against the Imperium, but against the thing his father has become. Now, in sticking with Guilliman, there is another version of a heresy that he could lead. One in a similar vein, but not one necessarily directed at his father. And that would be a war against the ecclesiarchy. In literal terms, perhaps it may not be called a heresy, but it would be a war against the Church of the Emperor. So it's about as close as you can get. Again, none of these scenarios are particularly likely, but I'd say this one is probably the most realistic. We know Guilliman despises the Imperial Creed, how faith and dogma has intertwined its way into every single aspect of the Imperium. There are countless moments throughout the lore of Guilliman vocally voicing his opinion, stating his disgust at the worship of his father, and how the Emperor himself denied it. And Guilliman appears to hold a particular loathing for priests, who spout the word of the Emperor as if it was their own. Something that infuriates Guilliman when he knows he alone has spoken with his father. We know there has been no small amount of political pressure and struggle between Guilliman and the ecclesiarchy. So much so that Guilliman felt the need to appoint a representative for the ecclesiarchy to accompany him. If the Imperium was safe and stable when Guilliman returned, I feel pretty safe in saying he'd already have re-implemented the Imperial truth, forcefully eradicating the ecclesiarchy. If somehow he ever managed to reduce the risk of chaos, I think it's a given that Guilliman would move against the ecclesiarchy in a heartbeat. He may see the need, even the benefit of it now, but make no mistake, Guilliman does not want or trust the Church of the Imperium. So, with two ways Guilliman could instigate a heresy, how about one that could be declared against him? Let's be honest, Guilliman's already come perilously close to having an outright civil war, with the former High Lords of Terror attempting to move against him, seeking to overthrow the self-appointed regent. If you've still not read the Watchers of the Throne series, go dive into it, because you will see how close it really came, not to mention how ruthless the Lord Regent can be. Despite putting down that attempted coup, the pressure and politics hasn't gone anywhere, and there is still a huge amount of mistrust in the returned Primarch. I know that can sound crazy to us, but we as the reader have Guilliman's accomplishments fresh in our minds. We are blessed to see it firsthand, to know his true intentions. To the people of the Imperium, or more importantly the ones that matter, the Primarchs and their legions are the reason why the Imperium nearly fell, why the Emperor has become imprisoned upon the throne, giving his eternal sacrifice. And what does this mythical Primarch do as soon as he returns? Well, he declares himself in charge and unleashes hundreds of thousands of new Astartes, rebirthing the legions in all but name. Honestly, you can see why many would mistrust Guilliman. And if we add to that his vocal opposition to the ecclesiarchy, it really all adds up to a lot of fearful eyes on Guilliman's back. He ended his first stage of the Indomitus Crusade, in no small part due to the political pressure. If Rabute did that, that shows it was no joke. What's going to happen when he begins amassing the next stage of the Indomitus Crusade? When the numbers of the Astartes begin to amass under his control once more? Dare I say it, if he asks Khal to perform another founding, all those fearful eyes will come right back, if indeed they went anywhere in the first place. If there ever was another heresy, it could well be against the returned Primarch, seeking to restore the rule of the High Lords of Terror. The rule that the Emperor himself intended. And finally, the Belisarius Heresy. Belisarius Khal is a man of ambition, quite possibly the understatement of the year. Numerous times he has requested Guilliman name him Fabricator General, each time being refused. How long until Khal's quite simply had enough of asking? Until he takes matters into his own hands. Guilliman himself doesn't fully trust Belisarius and his ambitions, and that is not only highly ironic, but about as damning as you can get. And it does have to be said, there is still a large amount of mystery about Belisarius, a lot of his past that we simply do not know. The fact that we have the line of Guilliman could foresee a time when he would become a problem in reference to Belisarius really speaks for itself. Belisarius is a radical. His brilliance is undeniable, but so too are his radical tendencies, the boundaries he pushes, the orders he ignores. And when you've got the gall to ignore the orders of the Lord Commander, it can really only go on for so long before it all comes to a head. With a move to control the Mechanicum, how would Guilliman react if the current Fabricator General came to him seeking aid? Guilliman would be forced to take up arms against Belisarius, and that would only open a whole other kettle of fish. Belisarius is the creator of the very armour of fate that Guilliman wears. He is the man who created and unleashed the Primaris, the Ultima founding. He is not to be underestimated. Considering how practical Khal is, can we really rule out the possibility of him installing a failsafe within Guilliman's armour of fate, in case the Guilliman who returned was not the one who left? The Primaris almost venerate Khal's name as much as Guilliman's. Who knows what kind of conflict within their minds that may cause? And considering the mind-wiping indoctrination process the Primaris undergo, is an Order 66 style event that impossible? Hey, we're crossing franchises here, but you can't rule it out. or if Core engineered in some form of failsafe which prevents the Primaris turning against him. Again, I wouldn't bet against it. How ironic it is that Belisarius Core, arguably the man most responsible for the Imperium's survival, could actually be its biggest threat. It's a really fascinating topic to think about. What would happen if Guilliman did have to stop Belisarius? I think that's definitely something we could discuss another day. And again, it's one that's been surprisingly teased within the lore. Now, other theories out there could be endless. Another Primarch return obviously could cause some major waves. Easily seeing a Lion or Rogel being extremely unhappy at the state of affairs, completely against Guilliman's actions. However, until those legendary names begin to return, I decided to leave those out of the possibilities today. The simple fact is, as unlikely as any new heresy may be, they could just be more likely than you would expect. And with some teases and hints of future strife already, maybe, just maybe, they could yet transpire. But as always everyone, what do you think? If there was another heresy, how do you think it could transpire? Would it be Guilliman turning against the Ecclesiarchy, turning against his father? Or would it be the institution turning against the returned Primarch? Or the radical Belisarius Core? As always, leave your thoughts in the comments below, I love to read them. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow, and if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.